Hey, Sean.
Yes, sir, Howard.
Hey, what do you think of this couch?
I love it.
It's like
The jokes can get going instantly. So, but
yeah, this couch ain't too bad, huh?
yeah, it's a great casting location
It is, and we
for
have
talent.
the recommended Amish dating space in between us.
That is correct. We are keeping the appropriate distance.
I think that's pretty nice. So we got a new set. Looks pretty good.
We do. So we got a new set. First day we've done it, and I showed up in my best sweatpants that get caught on camera
Your
here.
shoes look good, though.
Thank you.
Those are nice.
Thank you.
They come with paddles.
They are large. They just look big because they're white.
I got you.
So.
Hey, well, we like our new set, but we also have a guest today, right?
We do.
And this guest is a man of men. He is, not only is his name harkens the Vikings, but his actions are that of a true hero. And sometimes when you are a hero, doing the right thing can get you into a position that, well, everybody agrees you did the right thing, but things still happen.
That's
so
true.
We're going to hear a little bit about his story today.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually familiar with the story, so I think it's fantastic that we have him here with us to share it, especially in person. We'll dive into that throughout the podcast. I know there are many, many, many officers that have been in the same type of situation that honestly just we'll save it for a little bit later. We'll get into it.
So without further ado, let's introduce the Viking, Greg Hallgrimson. Did I pronounce it right?
You did.
See, it's a Viking name. I'm getting that.
Yeah, so Greg, thanks for being here with us, man.
Oh, I appreciate you guys having me here. This is very cool.
Thank you. And we have to say it every single week. The name of the podcast is Coptales&Cocktails. You were providing the cocktail for us. We provided the cocktail here. So we let you pick. You got to look at our little shelf behind us of what we had here on set with this, and you a fine choice. Went with a bottle of Old Elk, the rye. And I don't know if we've had that on here yet, have we?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know we have it. So the Old Elk rye that old Howard here picked up at some point somewhere.
I got this at Park Hill, man.
Park Hill Liquors.
We get a lot of it down at Park Hill, man. They've got a tremendous selection. Lance is a great guy.
Lances are great. Absolutely.
We like supporting him.
So we've all got our pours here, so cheers to you.
He's got it on the rocks, though. You know why?
That's cute.
Because his, I know. Well, his ancestors are from Iceland. They have to. They got to represent.
Got to have it cold.
I like you.
Yeah. See.
Yeah. I'm not gonna sit on that couch with you, but I like.
Well, you can. Well,
we
if you
do
sit
have the
between
space
Sean
in
and
between
I,
us. That's why it's saved.
Well, that's our next. That's in our next adventure.
Yes. Well, that's for a different podcast.
We'll be recording that. Well, Greg, tell us how you got to decide to be a 5-0, the police-o.
It's funny. I actually answered an email to a guy this morning and was telling him this exact thing. There's only probably 5 people on the planet that I've ever told this to, so this is a good one. But actually, I was working for a geological company. Kind of a fun job, but I was sitting in a parking lot of a strip mall. There was, just a bunch of different stores there. I was sitting in this parking lot doing a lot of paperwork, and I saw a car pull in. The guy in the vehicle by himself, and he pulled in. He parked next to one vehicle, opens up his driver's door, reaches across, tries the door on that car, finds out it's locked, pulls this door shut, backs out. You can see him just kind of looking around for a second. He backs in next to another vehicle. He backed in this time, opens up his driver's door, reaches across to the driver's door of that vehicle, and it's unlocked. So he gets that door open, reaches across, he grabs a bag out of the vehicle. Of course, I'm watching this from 80 feet, but I don't know what the bag is. I just, for whatever reason, just jumped out of the work truck I was in, ran across, and reached in his window and grabbed him and went at it. And, the 2 things I learned were always make sure they're wearing pants before you grab them. This guy was I don't know what he was honestly planning on doing. He had a little 25 caliber pistol sitting in his passenger seat, along with lingerie, some different things, and I think they were things he'd already stolen out of other vehicles.
Gotcha.
Because there was a Victoria's Secret right there. Well, the bag that he had gotten out of that vehicle was a Victoria's Secret bag. When I wasn't an officer yet, So when I had him by his throat and I started pulling him out the window, I realized he has nothing on from the waist down.
Nothing. Winnie the Pooh.
So I put him back, and I held on to him and yelled, and I had him put both his hands out and touch the mirror on the driver's side, and I grabbed his hands, held his hands, and just kept yelling at people that were walking through the parking lot, going to stores, and that was the other thing I learned was people don't want to get involved.
People don't want to get involved. Nope.
I was yelling at people and telling them, hey, I've got a guy, you need to call security, call police. People they heard me, they saw me, and they just snub and walk away. Finally, this elderly woman, she's like, oh yeah, she ran in a store and they got security coming, and just went from there. I decided that, I knew once that was done, it was time for me to do more than just that. So
Then catch half-naked people in the parking lot.
exactly.
With Victoria's Secret's bags that they're selling. Hey, we will tell you, though, that guy was probably going to end up being a serial killer from this podcast. Every time somebody has stolen panties, they've ended up doing horrible stuff.
Oh, wow.
This is true that we've found this out. So you were doing community service right there. Although that is kind of weird when the guy didn't have no britches on.
I was surprised. And he kept telling me the same thing over and over. He kept saying, he goes, come on, man, I didn't do anything. No harm, no foul. Just let me go. No harm, no foul. And that was the thing that stuck in my head the entire time. Even to this day, when somebody says that to me, immediately I go right back to that.
Sure.
It's just, and I think that was the first time I'd heard somebody actually use that. No harm, no foul. So that's kind of a wild deal.
Two things just hearing your story right there. Obviously, one, just talking about the guy that goes up and check doors. Good friend of mine, guy by the name of Aaron, just this week at his house, had his truck broken into. Yeah. First thing I said to him, man, were your doors unlocked? Yeah. He left them unlocked. And so anybody out there listening, people break into your cars, one of two things. You lay something, out in the back seat of your car, the front seat, a gym bag, a briefcase, something, a bag of shopping. They'll bust a window out if they see that. Otherwise, they just drive around and literally check for doors. If it's unlocked, I mean, hell, Howard's been the victim. We've had this conversation with Howard. He's been the victim of the same scenario with a van. Back door was unlocked. They got some stuff out of there. So
no, they didn't get some stuff. They got my mountain bike,
Well, I
man.
didn't want
That
to
was like my girlfriend.
I was trying to say, I know what they got. I didn't know everybody needed to hear what they got.
I
but
know. But hey, the Tulsa police got my mountain
we
bike
did.
back.
They within 24 hours actually found a guy riding his several $1,000 mountain bike. But the whole point of it, door was left unlocked. Secondly, talking about the guy being naked from the waist down, just told this story today. I was a young cop working from 5:30 at night till 3:30 in the morning. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, just about to get off my shift. I had pulled up to 3rd and Peoria at a stoplight. Car comes up right next to me honking. It's a guy. He's like, hey, man, I just caught a guy peeping through my daughter's window. I just caught her. He's in a station wagon, blah, blah, blah. We're sitting side by side at the light. This guy in the station wagon pulls up behind us as we're talking. He goes, that's him right there. That's him right there. Car takes off and get in a pursuit. Guy ends up in a dead end in an industrial area and bails out running. When he jumps out, he has on a T-shirt, nothing else waist down, and a pair of brown loafers. And the guy takes off running, have a foot chase with him. And you guys know, dead ass serious, you guys know this area. So I'm running through it's Jason, it's near your shop, man. That's where this happened at. And earlier in the shift, not to ramble on, but at the beginning of this shift, up in North Tulsa, I get in a foot chase with this young gangster kid selling dope. Catch him like in one block, this like 19-year-old. Into the same shift, I'm chasing like this 40-year-old out of shape white guy. Naked with just brown loafers and a T-shirt. And it takes me like 3 blocks to catch him. But when I run up next to him, I literally just take my spray out. I just run up next to him and spray him in the face as we're both running. And so he goes down, and then, I wait till someone else gets there to put him in custody so I didn't have to touch him.
Well, I can tell you, I have never ran naked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would be a delightful thing to do.
No, it wasn't delightful for me chasing him.
Just like, hey, suspect, he's right behind
Yeah.
the full moon.
Yeah, the description on the radio, T-shirt, naked.
Loafers,
But
in pursuit.
and exactly, it's just kind of as you were talking about why he was naked, or even what you were saying, this guy was a peeping Tom on a little girl,
Yeah,
that
can't
night.
have
So,
that stuff.
yep.
So, how old were you when you accosted the Victoria's Secret panty stealer that no harm, no foul?
About 34, 33, 34.
So you were late into law enforcement, basically.
Yeah, it's I had joined like a reserve position of a local PD at one time earlier, and you know, my thought process was I was serious enough about that career field. I didn't really want to start in it until I knew that I was mature enough, and it really took me quite a while to mature. It did, seriously.
We're waiting for us.
I wasn't done
It'll
playing,
happen.
you know. So, but yeah, that's I got a little bit of a late start, but I feel like that was an advantage, really.
No, it is. There's been guys that have I know come in, you know, through our department, and they stand out in the academy because they've got life's experiences. They know how to talk to people, you know, compared to me at 23 when I came through. You know, it's a big difference when you don't have those experiences. So it doesn't make you I don't think it makes you any worse of a cop. I think it definitely is it's a benefit for people that come in later. Because, I mean, the state of Florida, they've got kids out there that are like literally, I think, 20 years old that are out on the street with guns. I mean,
Damn,
it's
that's
just,
pretty young.
it's crazy. I mean, my son's that age. Can you imagine him being a cop?
Well, no, I've seen
Never mind.
some 20-year-olds that are mature for their age,
Mhm.
but not very many.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the truth.
Yeah.
So what agency did you work for?
I went to work for a city called Basehor, Basehor, in Kansas.
Okay.
Went to work for them. I was with them from late 2003 to April. Well, actually, it was the last day of September of 2013.
When you were in
March.
where's Basehor located?
It's in Leavenworth County, Kansas. It's about you guys heard of the Kansas Speedway, the NASCAR track?
Right, right.
It's 6 miles west of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
A
it's
lot
not
of-
in the flatlands of Kansas. You actually have a little hills.
Little, yeah, about 6 feet, yeah. But yeah, a lot of pursuits that went through there by the speedway. But it was a good agency. I learned a lot. I was fortunate enough through working there that a few of the people that I gained experience from had already really gotten to a point in their career where they could see the big picture. And that's something I really think is valuable for an officer, is to be able to actually see the big picture. And it took me a while to get there, but they really helped me see that.
After a quick break,
The
we'll
other
be
thing
right
that I
back
learned from
with
them
more
was how to
cocktails.
build a department, and how to what to look for in officers, really, to work for you. And it just kind of went from there.
Well, you said big picture. Tell us, what is the big picture when you're looking to build a police department?
Well, all right. So, that's the big question, I guess.
Right.
So building a police department, to me, the big picture. Now I was hired as chief of police for the city of Greenwood, Missouri. My very first day of work was April Fool's Day of 2013. So
No jokes, huh?
Been a long-standing joke about that one. But I went into that with my big picture being, I knew a lot of the background of the police department and the condition that it was in, as far as the training of the officers, the equipment, things like that. And it's located in Jackson County, Missouri, which is the same county as Kansas City. Independence, bigger cities like that. And I just wanted to make it a department that was professional enough that, regardless of the size of the other department, they looked at it and went, "That's what we need to do." And that was the big picture for me.
And when did you start there?
On April 1st of 2013.
And did you stay with them up until?
Yeah, up until December 17th of 2018.
Okay.
Yep. That was my last day in the office. I was on paid administrative leave for a couple months after that. Had a lot of really great support from not only my mayor, but from really every single person that worked in that city and lived there. I mean, the support was insane. I'd never seen anything like it. Never thought I'd ever experience anything like that. But
And when you're saying support, are you talking about throughout your time as the chief, or just the incident that we'll jump into here in a minute?
both, more so after the incident, but prior to the incident, the support there is something I really haven't talked much about. So I like that you asked that. The citizens there, they already had their own idea of police and how to hate them and everything. And luckily, I was fortunate enough to hire the right people. And I got some great officers in there, great command staff, and we came up with some really good ideas on how to work with the public. Now, we didn't bring the public in and have talks with them. What
Right.
we did was and it kind of goes back to locking your car. What we did were very simple things. I had a lot of foot patrol. Every officer had to do foot patrol, a certain amount of times per week, and they had to knock on doors, had to talk to people. Went to restaurants, went to the convenience store, things like that. Talk to people, see how they're doing, and then we, my lieutenant at the time and I were actually sitting and talking. It's just snowing its ass off outside, and wasn't a lot going on. And I said, the one thing that just irritates the hell out of me is when you guys have to go and waste your time taking a report, and it's because somebody didn't lock their door.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to hit that switch. You can go in your house and use the key fob.
Right.
I mean, it's super simple. And it's not just that, but leaving the laptop on the seat, whatever it is. And so, we need to figure something out. Well, we had a form company that made our door hangers and things like that for if we were serving a warrant or whatever. And so we got with that company and had them make door hangers for us. And it pertained to, we would actually, while they're on foot patrol, they had to pick 5 houses and 5 vehicles per foot patrol per night. And they had to go and check those cars, check that house. If they found anything unlocked at all, they left a door hanger or they tried to make contact personally. And it was things like that. And so the public just kind of turned a little bit and really started to like the department.
Sure.
I couldn't even tell you that they knew who I was personally until really after all my stuff really hit the fan.
Well, that's that's the thing for a chief. A lot of times if you've got the other guys below you doing stuff like that, they don't need to know who you are.
Right.
It's usually they're going to know who the chief is. If it's something, in front of the media, something good or bad is more than likely when they'll know who you are or have to hear you.
So you were hired as a chief around here. The sheriff, we have some elected officials, right? But you weren't an elected official. You were just hired for the job.
No, and in Missouri and Kansas the same way, the cities have their own choice of whether to make it an appointed position or an elected position. And mine was appointed.
Nice.
And that's how like Chief Franklin is, Wendell.
Right.
He's appointed by the mayor. And then Vic, who we've had here on the podcast before, he was elected.
Right.
So
The thing that's kind of interesting about this is your job is not so much a policing job as much as it's a political job. I mean, you're kind of the liaison between the bureaucracy, the police, and the public, which that's kind of a hard position to be put in.
It is. When I was in Kansas, the agency that I worked for there, I saw some just ridiculous things in city government, between the city government and the police department. I mean, ridiculous. And it's going to offend somebody, but at this point, it's just going to have to. Most people that get elected, especially in the smaller cities, that run and get themselves elected to a board of aldermen or a city council, as soon as they're on there, they have all this power and have zero idea how to use it.
Sure.
Zero. They automatically believe they're better than any cop, they're better than any fireman, they're better than any EMT, they're better than the public works, and they're smarter than all of them put together.
Yep.
Yes. And so I experienced that in a very big way on the Kansas side. And seeing all that, really, it didn't put a bad taste in my mouth toward government. It just put a bad taste in my mouth toward putting a guard down and not being cautionary about people. And I mean, we had a city council member that would actually, he'd listen to our calls when they went out and would show up on them sometimes. I took him down at gunpoint twice.
Yeah.
Second time was a pretty rough one. I think he learned his lesson. But, it had to be done because we didn't know who he was. It was dark. And here he comes barreling out from behind a building, and when you're out on a burglary call, it's just not smart.
So was he basically just trying to big brother you, or the officers? Hey, I'm the city council. I should be seeing what you guys are doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now on the Missouri side, it wasn't quite like that for me. But on the Missouri side, I'd already learned my lessons before I went there, and so when I went into the chief's position on the Missouri side, I pretty well made it known right off the bat that, if I thought you were an asshole, I walked up to you and told you, you're an asshole, stay away from me. I'm not dealing with you. You're going to have to find somebody else to come talk to me.
That's good communication.
Well, that's why when you first start off here, you had that conversation with Howard. It makes sense now.
Yeah, right.
So it makes a lot of
I was
sense.
talking to you.
So, Jason, how's the audio, man? Are you good? We're all good? You want this mic distance? Outstanding. Okay. Thanks. I just like name dropping you during the middle of it.
And
Jason-
Old Dale.
Jason Sales. Jason Sales.
But yeah, city councils, board members, whatever. I started out with not a very good one when I started in Greenwood on the Missouri side where I was a chief. I was happy to have that position, and I had a lot of dreams and aspirations. But after my first 4 days, I really was
4 days.
4 days. Oh yeah. Oh, you won't believe.
You were
Yeah,
full of
so-
piss and vinegar until day 5, and
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
oh, fuck this.
Yeah, day 5, I was like, you know what?
It's a long
position's-
week.
My position's still open back in Kansas. I can still go back. And I really thought about it. I thought
Right.
hard about it. Obviously, I'm very happy I didn't make that choice regardless. But, yeah, my first day there, I found out they had the entire police department in a construction trailer because the police department had actually been flooded. It got flooded. And I didn't know this. And so that was kind of a downfall. I was really shocked by that. So they had all of our files, all the evidence, everything in big shipping containers out in the parking lot. And,
Jesus.
oh, it was mayhem.
How big was your agency that you became chief of?
When I started there was me and 4 people,
Okay.
and that's it.
Yeah.
There's about 23 total when I left.
When you left, good. Okay.
So yeah, it was they hadn't had a chief and I'm not sure how long. I think a little over a year.
yeah.
How does the community deal with that lack of policing?
I don't know. And the problem was the board members, and I'm not going to take away from them in their knowledge. They just didn't have it. They didn't have the knowledge that it would take to run a police department, but they tried, and I'll give them that. But so my first day there, after finding out that they're in a construction trailer, I find the files that I'm looking for. I asked the guy that was a sergeant at the time, where's all the files on training? I need to see who's trained on what. I need to see what range scores are. I need to get this stuff figured out because to me, the very most important thing was training above all. Well, I find out it's been 2 years since any of them had been to the range. Nobody had been to the range and fired a weapon in 2 years.
Well, if there's 4 of them, hell, they ain't got time to go to the range. They're trying to keep
Well,
that
true.
damn town
Yeah.
hemmed
True.
up, man.
So we immediately got that squared away. Ended up getting new duty weapons, and it just everything snowballed from there. Just built the department, hired a lot of people, trained a lot of people. I'm fortunate enough that I held a lot of certifications in different fields for training, and so I was able to do a lot of that myself. I didn't have a lot of time to be what somebody would think is a chief's job.
Yeah.
Payroll was about the only part of that job I had time to do. The rest of it was we were on the range or we were doing defensive tactics or handcuffing techniques or, entries or whatever it was, and just trying to, because the last thing I wanted to do was to work somewhere as a chief, my first time being a chief, be there for 6 months and have somebody get killed,
Sure.
It was just my biggest fear. But it snowballed and everything went really well. Got a lot of funding from the city, and where we couldn't get funding from the city, we got funding elsewhere, and it just worked out great.
And that's obviously the everything from the police reform talk, and I know we typically don't do politics here on this, but over the last couple of years, that's been a lot of talks from people that are wanting change in law enforcement. Even those of us in law enforcement, we'd love better training or more training, and across the country, I don't think a lot of people understand. You take a larger department like Tulsa that's got 800 plus officers, or Owasso, we've got a guy sitting in here with us, tonight from out there. It's decent sized agencies that have better budgets, better tax brackets, that has money for funding for training, and things like that. But then you have an agency like this that here that has 4 officers, and people don't understand the training varies from place to place, typically because of what the budget looks like.
Right.
So unless there's some sort of, I think, national support for funding for training, I mean, those of us in law enforcement, we will not dispute, hey, we'd love everybody to have the same level of training. But just like you mentioned, Chief, is how do you send 2 guys off to training for 2 weeks, or let's say a DEA school down in Texas for 2 weeks when you've got 4 officers?
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. That's how difficult
Well, how
it
big
is.
was the town?
About 7,500.
But still,
It
that's
was right around 10 when I left. Yeah.
And you had support from, I assume, like the county as well to kind of back you up in that, or?
Yeah, I developed a good working relationship with the sheriff at that time, and he offered, whatever we need, that kind of a deal. And then one neighboring city to us, which was Lee Summit, the chief of police there at that time, a super good guy, and he was the same way. They both knew the pile of shit I stepped in,
Right.
and they were trying to help me clean it off my shoe. You
Yeah.
know, and
Good for them, man.
yeah, no, they were good. They were supportive for sure.
Well, speaking of a pile of shit,
Yeah.
you actually found yourself in one.
Hey,
That-
before we talk about that though, 7,500, small town, right? What kind of crime goes on there?
Well, we had attempted homicides. Before I had actually gotten there, they had just popped a guy on child pornography. It's not every day that things happen there like it would in Kansas City, Missouri, but it happens there every week. It's my last 2 weeks there, I was in 3 pursuits myself. Had a lot of fights, a lot of arrests, a lot of combative subjects. We ended up popping a house after we got warrants for a no-knock, and ended up getting 60 some odd plants out of it. And it ended up turned out that the people that were actually doing everything actually worked for the IRS at the time. So that was an interesting thing.
That is interesting.
Using IRS computers to keep track of things is what I understood. But
They're good accountants, man.
yeah,
I bet you they could tell you exactly how many plants were there. Huh?
Yeah, I'm sure they could. But no, luckily I didn't have officers that got injured very often or anything like that. But we ended up. Well, I guess to answer your question, here's the easiest way. The history of the city, and I can't remember, the SafeWise, I believe is the name of the site, but they measure all the different cities as far as how safe they are with violent crime or burglaries, things like that.
Right.
And that city had never made the top 5. So in 2016, 2017, and 2018, those 3 years it made top 5 safest cities in the state of Missouri, regardless of population. And then 2017, which was the second year, it actually was named the safest city.
Nice.
So that was a big accomplishment. That was a pretty
Absolutely.
Cool thing. Yeah.
Well, seeing cops out on patrol walking a beat doesn't hurt, you know.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you what, some very adamant police officers. They didn't take no for an answer, and they wouldn't stop.
Well, that's Sean's always talking about. We're the police. We don't wait for crime to happen. We go out and make sure the community's safe.
Yeah, we had an old chief here, and that was his line, and I thought it was great. It was like, we're the police, not report takers.
There you go.
That was his line. He's like, man, you get out there and be a policeman. You don't just take the reports that come on the radio. Get out there and do your job.
Active, not reactive.
That's it, man. It like I said, I love that line. We're the police, not report takers. I thought that's great.
Oh yeah.
So the reason we were able to come across, you're a handsome fella, first of all.
Well,
Right.
thanks.
Many other
He's a
reasons.
Viking, man. Did you hear
Yes,
this?
I know. He's like barrel-chested, and he's
I'm staying on this couch.
very vascular in his arms.
Yeah,
And he doesn't even shave like Jason's legs. So
Jason's legs are very smooth.
yeah, well, they're not vascular; they're smooth, but they're
Jason's been staring at his steel blue eyes over there too.
yeah. So we're, all of a sudden we're gonna have like the most YouTube video views we've had on one of our episodes here, directing everybody towards this. But the reason we obviously came across you is your story. Obviously had some national attention with it. It's, I don't know if the word is unique in itself. Like as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, I don't want to get into it as something damn near every police officer in this country has found themselves in a similar type of position.
Oh, yeah.
So let's kind of just go through this call that came in that you responded to, date, all that, so forth.
Sure. Where do you want me to start with it?
We usually like the beginning.
The beginning?
Yeah, let's go, man. Hey.
Don't go backwards? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was December 17th of 2018, about just a little bit after 10 o'clock in the morning. I was back in my office doing payroll. It was on a Monday, and that's when I always did my payroll. And
We like to get paid. The policemen do like to get paid.
I've learned, and they carry guns, so you should pay them.
Yeah. It's a great job. I probably would have done it for free when I was young, but as I got older, I definitely like those paychecks.
Exactly. Well, there wasn't a whole lot going on that morning for me. I was just trying to get payroll done before I ventured out and did anything else. And I heard my corporal yelling for me, and I didn't know what was going on. I could just tell by his voice that it was something very serious.
This was over the radio?
No, in person. He was down the hall yelling for me. He was actually, I found out later, I didn't know at that time, but he was actually in the foyer near my lieutenant's office where the public can enter, and he had came from there and was yelling as he went down the hall for me, which was interesting because my lieutenant was right there, and 2 other officers were right there also, and he bypassed them and went to me, which I kind of think maybe when he heard what he was told, I think maybe he had a little tunnel vision. That's what happened. But I bounced up and ran out and tried to find out what's going on. And he just, as soon as he saw me, he turned and started running the other way. He said, "We got to go. We got to go." The guy came in and said he threw his baby in a pond on Doc Henry Road. Yeah, that's all I knew at that moment. You know?
So this guy actually came into the police station and said what he did.
Yeah.
And this is December.
Yeah, December 17th.
In Missouri.
Yeah, about 22 degrees. That morning.
Jesus.
And so, and it had been real cold all that weekend prior to, but I'm running behind him, running down the hall, and as I go down the hall toward the end of the hall, before you take a right turn to go out into the foyer, my lieutenant's office was right there, and his door's open. And as I go past, I look and I see the suspect, and I just, at that moment, I knew who it was. I knew he was the suspect. I didn't know the guy, but he's sitting in a chair behind a desk, and when I looked in there and saw him, it's just, there's nothing there.
It's a blank stare.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so I knew, okay, that's the guy. He's not restrained, but I've got 3 people in the PD right there. Well, I keep going, follow my corporal out. We get in our cruisers. We go to where the pond is, bail out and run down. This bank is probably, the pond's 60 yards probably from the roadside, 70 maybe, not very far. Broke through a little bit of ice at the edge of the pond. End up getting a hold of the baby. My corporal actually got the baby first and was trying. He was back on the bank with the baby and was trying to give her CPR. Just couldn't get anything to happen. And once I finally got up to where I could be with him again, he kind of, and I don't know if he handed her to me or I took her, but I ended up with the baby face down in the palm of my hand and just was working on her, trying to do something. I turned her, he actually got her back, turned her back over, and I don't know if he told me to do it or if I just did it, but I started clearing stuff out of her throat, and I knew there wasn't any air getting in her. There wasn't any air coming out. And so when we held her mouth open, I took 2 fingers, and man, I couldn't tell you how deep I went. I mean, it was.
Mm-hmm.
But
How old was she?
6 months.
Okay,
Jesus.
brand new baby.
So
Yeah.
you're driving in the car with the other officer. You're heading this way. How far are you from the police station?
Yeah, we were in separate cruisers. We're probably where that call was, maybe 2 miles, 2.5 miles from the PD. It wasn't very far.
Yeah.
So you get out. You both roll out of your cars. You run. I assume you're kind of scouring the pond to see where this child might be. You don't have an exact idea.
Right.
What kind of horror do you have inside of you when you're just looking at that bank? I mean, what's going through your head?
Nothing. Honest to God. I mean, I'm glad I had the forethought to strip gear as I'm running, but no. As far as the thoughts going through my head at that point, it was like every time that I ended up in a fight, there's no thought. It's win. That's all it is. It's win. And so that was the process. And when I got to the edge of the pond and when I saw the baby,
Damn.
she was face down, floating. Thank God she was floating. But her skin was just pure white. And I honestly thought, and I said this before, but I honestly thought that this was a porcelain doll. I thought that at this time,
That white.
this guy's whacked.
Yeah.
No,
you didn't. So you literally thought this guy's just crazy. He threw a
Yeah.
doll in the water.
until I touched that skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
How
then it
far was she? I mean, you had to break the ice at the edge of the pond to get to her.
She's about 12, maybe 14 feet out. He threw her.
Yeah.
And in his federal statement, he actually said he stood at the edge of the pond, threw her as far as he could, and stood there and watched her sink out of sight. before he left.
I have to go to the restroom, so we're going to plug in a
estimate she was
commercial
that
right
water
here.
for 12 to 14 minutes.
So how long did it take? I mean, was the water pretty deep? Did you waded in?
No, it wasn't deep. It wasn't very deep, luckily. But maybe waist deep at the most, maybe just a little bit above that. But you know, and I don't want to venture off into this side of this unless that's where you guys want to take it. But you know, even the nightmares I've had since then, the water looks the exact same way it did that day, and that is, it's just the color of it's just a pure dark color, and then you've got this one white speck right there. I mean, there was no mistaking where that baby was.
Right.
And you know,
Dude, that is horrible to. I mean, you spoke to the nightmares, but I mean, the thought of even seeing something like that. I mean, most people can't deal with it, much less react. There's a lot of people that would have frozen in that situation, you know, but you went in, grabbed the baby, resuscitated the baby. That's what you a motherfucking hero.
Well, I just about promise you there's everybody in this room would do the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm just the one that made a wave and all this happened to.
I think you're being a little modest. There's a lot of people that don't act that way.
Well, hopefully they're not the ones that are still in law enforcement.
But I was just going to say, then they shouldn't be cops. If there's any cop in the country or fireman or EMT guy, you know, someone who's being paid to do their job, if they're not wading into that water and doing that, they have no business being employed.
Exactly.
So you guys you're working, flipping the baby, and I mean, even that goes back to obviously basic CPR choking stuff that you learn, you know, in the academy for infants. What you're doing, flipping them back and forth and all that. Yeah.
Yep. So we got the airway cleared, and I still to this day when I did, and of course I don't think about it very much. That's not why the hell would I don't want to. But the amount of stuff I pulled out of that little girl's throat, I don't know how the hell it got in. Well, obviously she's breathing, gasping for air.
Yep.
And it's sucking in the weeds and the moss and whatever's under the water. But man, I mean, it was just, I think I did 3 swipes over her throat, and I'm knuckle deep, and I'm just pulling out gobs of stuff, you know. And then once I felt like there was enough out of there, I wiped her eyes, and hell, her eyes were just mudded shut, you know, just full of mud. And so once her airway was clear, I mean, that's what it took, you know. A little more CPR, and we got just a little bit of a whimper out of her. And my corporal, probably one of the best guys that I've ever met as far as police go, tells it like it is 100%, and very, very, not cold-hearted, I call him strong-hearted. And when I looked up at him after that whimper, I thought we were going to both start bawling.
Sure.
I thought we were going to fall apart. He was a new father at that time.
You a father yourself?
Of 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so once we got that whimper, we kind of had that little millisecond in there where do we fall apart or not? And we got her up to his cruiser because it was still running. He was smart enough to leave his running. I wasn't. And we got her in the front seat of his cruiser, got all the air vents on her, heater blowing as hard as it can go. I stripped down out of just about all of it out on the side of the road to cover her in what's not wet, you know, to help her get warm. She's got a diaper on, that's it, nothing else. You know, just kept rubbing her front, back, you know, trying to dry her hair and stuff, just trying to get her warmed up somehow, get a body temperature going. And I do want to say that pertaining to what we were just talking about, you know, I said anybody in this room would have done the same. One thing I want to make clear to you guys is her body temperature was 87.6 degrees.
Wow.
Now, that's after she'd already gotten to the hospital. That's 45 minutes after getting her out of the pond, probably, is my guess. At that kind of a body temperature, her organs have slowed down, you know, quite a bit. And yeah, we did our part. I'm not going to take away from that. But her organs being slowed down like that, that body temperature being like it was, is what really, really saved that kid's life.
So Howard, as the nurse over here, as in
That's
the medical field, talk to us.
That's the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve is what you're talking about. The affinity for red blood cells to release oxygen. Her temperature had decreased the demand in her body, but what she could still do was get a little bit of oxygen out of the red blood cells that she currently had, and it kind of put her. We do this with people who have like heart attacks. We'll do a hypothermia protocol. We'll cool their body, and that's to preserve their organs. Wow. So her being in the cold pond made all the difference in the world in that. But what else made the big difference was you clearing her throat. And here's what you said. Anybody would do this. Great, yeah. Anybody in hindsight would do this. But I've been, as a nurse, in situations, in hospitals, with trained professionals. When someone goes bad, they freeze.
They lock up. Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
And they don't know what to do. So that's why I'm calling you a hero. You knew what to do and how to apply. The knowledge is only good if you have applicability. And you had applicability. You were able to take the knowledge you had and save that little girl's life, which, damn, man. You're a badass.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope anybody would do it for, obviously, any human. Right. You know, I mean, hell, we're in a, I don't want to say in an age now, but I mean, I know we are expected from the public, from politicians, from people like that. You know, you've got a shitbag that's shooting at the police. We defend our lives, shoot them, and then we have to go right away administer first aid to them. So, you know what I mean? I mean, that's where we're at nowadays. And, you know, once upon it, I mean, you've got a guy trying to kill you, and you're like, fuck that guy. But, I mean, we can't do that nowadays, so we are expected to do things like that.
So you got her warmed up. EMS shows up on the scene, I assume.
Or did you guys go to the hospital with her? You guys drove to the hospital, or they met you there?
We stayed right there by the pond in the cruiser. And the fire department showed up with their EMTs. Probably 12, 13-minute time period. I'm not sure. Again, for my corporal, you know, pat on the back for him. While we were en route to that pond, he was calling for medical, just in case there was actually a baby. And so that helped get them there a little bit quicker. You know, and I don't know what difference it really. I think it made a difference as far as our hypothermia went, for sure. But yeah, they show up. They come over and they want to take custody of her, and man, I didn't want to give her up, but they get her, get her on the bus, and I don't know how long she was on the bus, you know, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. My corporal had gone to check on her, and he hadn't came back, so I was walking over to check on everything, and he came back. He catches me halfway and says, "She's okay, you know, treating her for severe hypothermia right now. They're going to transport in a few minutes." Told me what hospital she's going to, things like that. I just kept having this picture in my head, and it was almost like that chapter's over with. Now we're starting a new one, and that new one was my lieutenant sitting there. This guy's unrestrained, sitting in his office. It all goes back to running down the hall and seeing him. And so I jumped back in my cruiser and ran hot all the way back to the PD. I remember pulling into the parking lot. I remember bailing out, running through the parking lot. I remember opening the door to the foyer. The way it was constructed, you open up an outer door. It was a public entrance. You went into this little foyer area. From there, you had 2 doors. You either go straight ahead or to your left. To the left was my lieutenant's office. Straight ahead would take you down the hall to our squad room, evidence, everything, everything else. And so to enter either one of those doors, you had to put in a 4-digit code. I remember opening up the door to that outer foyer. That's it. Next thing, I'm getting kicked, punched. Got somebody on my back, and I see this guy on the ground underneath me, and I know exactly what I've done to him. I mean, you can't mistake that. I knew what I did. Regardless of whether I have that memory of doing it or not, I know what I did. And so it just went from there. I had my lieutenant and the other officers were trying to get me off the guy, and just it's, and I still it's such a strange thing because I don't want to get into the psychology part of it, that God knows, but to still not have that memory now is a strange thing. And so just kind of skipping through it, so I ended up with the attorney that I hired, good attorney, really good attorney, but we ended up having to go and have a meeting with the FBI at the Justice Center. They wanted us to view the body camera video. Another little tidbit to give my department kudos: we were the first agency in the state of Missouri to issue body cameras.
Wow.
So
Nice.
This is 2018 when this happened, right?
This is 2018
Yeah.
when this happened.
So this is recent.
That's
Yeah.
some cutting edge policing.
And so we went to work with a company called Digital Ally out of Lenexa, Kansas, and developed the body cameras with them. We did all their testing and evaluation and product development and thing like that with them. And in return, they supplied my department with all the cameras we needed,
Nice.
all the equipment, everything. So, but my lieutenant had his body camera on during the entire thing, as per policy, which was great. But anyways, we went and we sat in this meeting room with the FBI and the prosecutors, and my attorney told me, he said, just prepare yourself and just be numb if you need to be. And I watched that video and
Let me ask you this: did the FBI, and just so basically you came back, you got into it with this dude,
right.
basically put an ass whooping on him, essentially. Other officers are pulling you off. It's caught on body camera. So with the FBI involved, is that because of a civil rights violation? Was the FBI looking at doing you for a civil rights deal,
Correct.
essentially? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our county prosecutor at that time was extremely happy to hand it up to the federal level. Very happy to do that.
Happy to because they didn't want to prosecute it, or because they wanted to fuck you?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah. They wanted to fuck me, but so we sit in the boardroom and watch this, and I've never had an experience like that where I'm watching myself do something that I have no recollection of.
Right.
And it was just I just sat there in tears. I mean, because I mean, honestly, what they did was bring me up there to, I believe, to see what my reactions were going to be, and it wasn't good because my reaction was I'm watching my career
Just done.
right there.
Yeah.
And I mean, what kind of reaction would they expect? But that turned into a rough week for me.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I started out talking about it early on in the, when we first opened this podcast today, is throughout your career, police officers are going to go those type of calls. And you're going to go to calls. For me, luckily, I had a few. Obviously, there's ones where adults sexually abuse kids, and if you're a father like yourself, myself, Howard, in civilian life, you just as a man, you want to handle that. The other part for me was a big one is guys that beat on women. And I didn't grow up in a household where my parents even fought, let alone anything like that happened. But you show up at these calls where some woman's been beaten by a guy, and it's just like you literally, you want to, as a man, go, hey, man, you want to use a woman as a punching bag? Come get some of this. And like I said, throughout your entire career, you are faced with those type of deals over and over again. Obviously, because of the job, you can't handle it that way. You wish you could. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it is. You wish you could because you see these guys that, you slap handcuffs on them and then they go to jail. Sometimes the victim doesn't show up. They get dismissed. They're back out on the streets. They get some little slap on the hand type of sentence. But yeah, sorry.
Oh no, you're 100% correct, and and that's probably, to me, that's one of the biggest problems I think law enforcement faces, especially now, because it's now it's don't touch me, don't hurt me world, regardless of what's going on. And
well, and listen, I'm not obviously from the criminal side of things or from being a police officer, not justifying anything you did as a man, as a father,
Right.
100%. Like hell, fuck that guy, that type of thing. But just as you were talking in this day and age now, violence isn't pretty. For one, even justifiable violence, it's not pretty.
Right.
Somebody that's fighting a cop and a cop, puts an ass whooping on a guy, or a guy shoots at a cop and a cop shoots a guy numerous times. It's not pretty,
Right.
but now everybody still questions it.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an upsetting thing. But you know, the thing I think law enforcement faces more now than ever is restraint, and that's, you know, officers that are out there right now doing their job. You go to a domestic, you see a 105-pound woman that you know yesterday was very pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Today you don't know what skin color she is, because she's beaten so bad by a 250-pound guy.
Right.
And you know damn good and well she most likely is not going to testify, regardless of what the state wants. And then 3 weeks later, you're going to be right back there with the
Same house.
thing, and she may be dead this time.
Same house. Yep.
And there's nothing, and so the officers have to have so much restraint, and that's something that I don't think the public understands. You know, I mean, walk in and stub your toe on a coffee table, and then go pray. How's that going to work for you?
Right.
You know, and so you go to a domestic, you deal with that. Next thing you know, you got to go over here to a deceased person call, where you've got the entire family there. They all know that the person's already dead. They're bawling, crying. How you gonna handle it? I mean, the restraint is a huge thing, and I think that's something that definitely needs to be taught more in the academy. They need to understand that they're going to have to figure out how to work that restraint.
Oh yeah.
So what did the FBI think of your reaction?
I don't know. I was never told. I guess it went okay. You know, but and I do want to say, you know, the day I was served the federal indictment. So that happened December 17th of 2018. The incident with the baby in the pond. That Friday after that, I was already scheduled to have surgery on my right shoulder. I'd hurt it weightlifting, and so I had to go and have my surgeries done on that Friday. So basically, I was scheduled off anyways. You know, whatever. So while I was off, recouping from that surgery, getting my paid administrative leave, the state's doing their investigation, all that stuff's going on. I had heard that there's a chance it may get kicked to the federal level, but nothing was positive yet. I was still working with my FOP attorney, but I get a knock at the door, and I answer the door, and it's two FBI agents, and they serve me the federal indictment, and introduced themselves. They both shook my hand, both very professional. You know, they were. You could tell they were probably, you know, pretty compassionate people, most likely parents. But I can't say anything bad about the agents that I had to deal with my thing. They did their job, and they did it the way they were taught to do it, and the way they were expected to do it. You know, so no animosity whatsoever. But you know, the prosecutors, same thing. You know, they're doing their jobs. I get it, but I always kind of felt like there was a gray area in policing. To me, there is a gray area in law enforcement, because if you're only black and white and that's all you are, you know, the world, then
Your jails are full.
Well, I was going to say, you're writing every single ticket. You're taking every single person to jail for petty ass stuff. I mean, that's it. If you're living in the black and white, there's a lot of discretion.
yeah,
That's the word.
Yeah,
There's a lot of discretion in this job.
Perfect. Yeah, and using that discretion is a big thing, and apparently at the federal level, there's no discretion.
There's not much discretion.
So I learned that, but
So what happened as far as the criminal aspect of it?
so when it first came out, they were talking about I had hired a federal attorney because my FOP attorney bailed on me, and my federal attorney actually at one time was a prosecutor for the Justice Department, so I felt like I was in really good
That
hands.
experience, yeah.
Yeah, and so he had explained to me the guidelines that they use at the federal level, and I don't remember the exact number that I was at, but it seemed high to me at the time when he explained it to me. But he had talked about, you know, up to 12 years of federal prison is what I was explained in the beginning of this whole process, and so immediately I'm scared to death. You know,
What was the charge? I mean, what was it?
civil right violation?
So just a 1983 or whatever they call it. Okay.
Yeah, and so, you know, I spent basically a little over 2 years just worried. You know?
Sure.
But you know, we ended up. I couldn't tell you the exact date, but we ended up. I called and spoke with my attorney. This had been a year ago, 8 months ago, something like that. And I said, with the climate toward law enforcement the way it is right now, as negative as it is, I really feel like maybe a plea bargain is our best way. And he said, well, I'll do what you want to do. He was pretty gung ho at first about going to trial. He really wanted to see this go to trial. He thought we had a good chance. But with the way things had changed after that election, I really got worried. And so we agreed to go ahead and do the plea bargain. He did everything he needed to do, present it to the prosecutors there at the Justice Department. They hashed it out, and originally they were supposed to be a guilty plea in exchange for 24 months of probation. They talked about me paying restitution to the father of the baby.
Fuck that.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and then fines, things like that, But in the end, what the judge did was 5 years of probation, no fines, no restitution. So
Let me ask you this: what about the shitbag that threw his baby in the pond? What happened to him criminally?
So about 3 months prior to my sentencing hearing, he had received a sentence of 15 years. Now,
What was his sentence for? What was the charge?
it was an assault charge.
So not even on. I mean, I don't know what obviously it varies by state if they had some sort of
Right.
attempted
Yeah,
homicide, attempted
Missouri's
murder.
pretty far behind the curve.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, it was a. They don't have one for for child abuse, child in need of care. They don't. So it was an assault charge, basically like a second degree, that type of a thing. So
Is that an 85% charge? Is there like a mandatory minimum there?
no, with him, mental health figured into a lot of it too.
Gotcha.
Which and to my understanding, that's where he's actually doing his time at his mental health.
A mental health facility.
Yeah, and so if he went to, and I think everybody in here probably understands that, if that man went to actual prison.
Oh yeah. The inmates themselves would deal with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And so he's probably way better off being where he's at. And learning what I have about mental health, and going through what I went through. I don't feel for the guy. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't deserve any less than he got. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope they can fix him. I hope they can fix him because, ultimately the big picture on this is we're talking about a 6-month-old girl she's getting ready to turn 3 now if she hadn't already turned 3. So 13 years from now she's going to be 16 years old. Look at the story she's got to live with. This kid, her life's screwed.
Where is she now?
She's with a distant aunt. So the parents lost all custody of all their kids. And so they
had more kids.
They had 2 other ones that as soon as my thing happened and got broken up there in my lieutenant's office, we sent one of our female officers over to the grade school to take the other 2 children into protective custody. And so everything was all taken care of as far as the children go right then, before we even had the mother come down or anything like that. So, to my understanding, I think the mother may have supervised visitation right now, but I'm not 100% on that.
Do you know if the little girl, physically she recovered okay?
100% recovery.
That's insane.
Yeah,
Good for you.
It is. I'd say it's crazy. It's amazing, obviously,
yeah.
but it's crazy. 100% recovery.
It was interesting, and I don't know, maybe you've experienced this. I try to talk to officers when I can to find out, but that was the only call I've ever gone to in my entire career, regardless of what agency I worked for, where cars literally, 800 yards ahead, just got out of the way.
Yeah.
I'd never gone to a call where I didn't have to hit the brakes. And I didn't have to hit the brakes on that call, not one bit. We got to there's no way we could have got to the pond quicker than we did. And so I think there's a lot that figures into that whole thing. But that's something I always question myself about in the back of my head. How in the world did that happen?
Yeah. Obviously our podcast typically is roughly about 50 minutes. Love the fact that this story, we're going longer. No problem with that. where are you at, as far as now? Obviously, you're living here in Oklahoma. You're no longer in Kansas. We'll kind of talk into going into that. But, for people listening, I mean, just to understand, I guess, the ramifications of, what happened here. Got federally indicted.
Right.
You're no longer a police chief. Essentially, you've got a federal conviction now.
Yep.
That'll stay with you forever, and all the things that come along with a conviction. A buddy of mine, or a couple of different guys that I know, we had a corruption investigation that happened in Tulsa that were convicted federal deals. And it's obviously life-changing, in numerous aspects. But you talked about the mental health stuff of what you went through, or even possibly still deal with today. What's that about?
It's it started out, I guess, like somebody would imagine. I don't know, but it started out with a lot of seclusion on my end. I had a little man cave, and the person that I was in a relationship with at that point, her and I had a townhouse together, and I had a little man cave that, I stayed there all the time.
Yeah.
And I literally would fight sleep. I stay up as late as I possibly could, usually average around 2.5 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Still do that sometimes. But I'd fight sleep as much as I could because I was scared to death I was going to have a nightmare. Scared to death of it. And so I'd fight sleep. Well, she never saw me. Hell, every time I went to bed, she'd been asleep for 5 hours, But the seclusion started. Nightmares were there. I decided that, I need to just start drinking and just see how that works out for me, and it didn't work out well. So I stopped doing that at the rate I was, for sure. And, things just kind of mentally, things got to a point where I'm not going to say I was ready to just end it at that point, because I wasn't. I had hope and I had faith, I was still talking to my mayor, believe it or not, every single day that man called me.
Supportive. Obviously, I understand
Very.
what happened was criminally wrong, but supportive.
Very supportive.
And you mentioned it, kind of before we went on, started the recording here today. You had a ton of support from people, across the country, right?
Yeah.
Because this was a national story, but you had a lot of support from people.
Yeah, I did. And the citizens in that city actually, when the news broke on the whole thing, the citizens had actually gone and had signs made at a UPS store that said, "We support Chief Hallgrimson," and they were posted all over yards and stuff throughout the city. And I had just, that part was really overwhelming for me. I couldn't believe that, But, the mental aspect of it was just trying to figure things out. What's going to happen? If this happens, how am I going to react? What am I going to do? I hated people, didn't want to be around them. God forbid, leave the house. I didn't want to do that ever. And so it took me quite a while to finally get to a point where I could kind of make myself go and do things. And then the woman I was with, her and I were at a neighborhood pool, and I'd actually she was climbing out on the ladder to get out of the pool, and I was behind her, getting ready to get out behind her. And as I got on the ladder, somebody yelled my name from in the pool, and so I turned to look back, and when I looked back, there's that baby, and that's the only thing that's in that pool.
Shit.
Yeah. And so I lost my shit, and
They're out there.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I lost my shit and got taken to the emergency room, and so there's a lot to the mental side of it, and what
sure.
I've learned is, as officers, as first responders, we lock all this stuff away in these little boxes. Every single call just gets locked away, and so we can go to the next one, and we don't get a choice of when they come out. If we don't go and talk to somebody and get that shit handled, it's going to come out when we don't want it to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's my biggest thing.
That goes for everybody. Hell,
Life's hard.
Yeah, it is real hard. I had a couple of bad years with COVID, shoving people in body bags.
Oh, man.
I came back, had a strong mind before I left, came back, needed some help.
Yep.
And I think part of it is the thing that I really respect about you is that you're really empathetic. You feel all this stuff. You feel this is why that you went into this fugue state and beat the shit out of this guy, is because you do feel and you're empathetic towards folks. So it makes you a good cop, you know?
I think so. Yeah, you got to have compassion to be an effective officer. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, this is probably one of for sure one of my favorite podcasts, just to see the humanity. And this is why we do the podcast, because we started this off. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about any of that shit. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make cops human, because they are. I mean, they're put in horrible situations every fucking day, right? They see shit you should never see every day, and yet they keep going to work every day. So kudos to you. This is exactly what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
Humanizing people who wear the goddamn badge.
Yeah, you know, and just going back to just talking about having all this stuff bottled up, people handle stress differently. I mean, we see it even with, you know, I come from a military family. My brother's been over there in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that. And you see, you know, we all know the well-documented or talked about mental health issue with military guys, suicide rates and things like that. People handle different things differently on what bothers them and what doesn't. And throughout my whole career, you know, I even had 1 year I was in our major crimes homicide, and here in Tulsa, if you're part of that unit, you basically go to every unnatural death. So you see every way a person could die. And, you know, and Tulsa's a good-sized city, so you see a lot of them during that year. But out of my entire career, the only thing that ever bothered me, that choked me up, that, you know, I did a tattoo show called Hero Inc. when I got a tattoo, and I talked about it, and I started crying during the interview on it. And it was about a little kid that was a 2-year-old boy, and it still, even like right now, I can literally feel myself choking up. It was a 2-year-old boy that was the same age as my son at the time. And I had to go to the hospital and take pictures of him, and he was beaten head to toe. And he was just, his entire body was bruised. And we had to go because they thought he was going to die. And he actually ended up surviving. And it was just one of those deals. It's like, man, I'm a dad. How the fuck could somebody do this to their own kid? You know, just like that type of deal that you go to. And so, you know, there are, it's whether it's the human mind or, you know, each individual person, it is, I say the word interesting, but there are what bothers one person to another. But going back to, like you said, Howard, your own thing with COVID, we're talking about the military chief, you know, what you went through there. These type of jobs, they're tough, you know, and you know, not to be, we all know, obviously now there's a lot of psychological services. You know, here in Tulsa, we have our own psychological services group, like literally professionals that offer free counseling, marriage counseling, stuff you're dealing with at work. We've got that peer-to-peer program. Every time like an officer's involved in a shooting or they show up at a bad fatality car accident and it fucks them up, you know, we have officers that you can call out that have had additional training they can talk to. And it's something that at one time, 10 plus years ago, it was, I don't want to say frowned down on, but you know, in these lines of work, it wasn't macho.
It made you look weak.
Yeah, exactly. It made you look weak. And now, I mean, here you are, you know, you were a police chief and obviously, you know, dealing with it. And like I said, you know, I thought I had a pretty decent career here and was chasing, you know, the worst of the worst in Tulsa and still had things that, you know, you have to go talk to people about, or just like you, like I said, you've been a nursing a long ass time and have seen a lot of stuff, but these last 2 years are the ones that got you.
Right.
You know, that fuck with you. So you're obviously living here in the Tulsa area now. I think this story's fantastic, just how you ended up here. How'd you end up down here in Tulsa? And you don't have to be very specific, but as far as you ended up in the Tulsa area.
Well, I've got a little backstory I didn't let you in on yet. If you want, I want to hear
Let's
that
go.
one.
Hear it.
All right, so the backstory is a little, it's not as cheerful, but so back in just this past June, I'm working at a car dealership because I can't be a cop, so I'm working at this car dealership.
And not to cut you off, Chief, the buddy of mine that went to federal prison, the cop, he worked at Lexus dealership once he got out. He got a job at the Lexus dealership. So, yeah, same type of deal, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. But, yeah, I was working there, and every day on my lunch break, when I left on lunch, I would get a hold of the woman I was with, and we would talk during my lunch, you know, and things were fine. Well, I got a hold of her that day, and things were fine. You know, the stress of my thing had really gotten to her. She'd reached her end, and that was it. And so I lost my shit that day pretty bad, and I just took off, drove around. I had just gotten 2 new prescriptions, and my plan was to just go sit in the parking lot, and that was it. I ended up somehow in the parking lot of an emergency room. I was a nurse getting off duty, had off shift, had came out, and she noticed me and said, "Hey, you doing okay?" And of course I fell apart, She gets me in there, and before I know it, they said, would you can self-induce, you can go ahead and bring yourself in, or we can go ahead and do an evaluation ourselves. And I said, no need for the evaluation.
It's needed.
Yeah, and so I put myself in a psychiatric hospital for 8 days, and learned a lot there. Made some good friends with people that in my career never would have thought I could have been friends with.
Yeah.
But I found human beings is what it was, really, because working every day, being an officer, dealing with what we dealt with every single day, you don't look at the people that you go to calls for, the suspects or even the victims, as somebody you could ever be a friend with. They're part of that work day. That's what they are. And so being in that place, I learned a lot, about people and how people really are, and what's underneath. And then I got out, went back to work, and then this woman in Ohio had actually started a support group for me on Facebook, because it was right about that time I did my plea hearing, so that I could do my plea bargain, and all that made the news and everything. And I'd actually just gotten back on Facebook at that time. And so this woman, Sherrill from Ohio, started this support group for me. So we support Chief Hallgrimson, and this lady sent me a message. I don't know how many hundreds of messages I got. I literally answered every single one of them. But she sent me a message and just said, "Hey, I support you." And I saw that she was from this area, and I had a buddy of mine in high school. His uncle lived down here. He had family down here, and we used to come down and go fishing and hunting and stuff. And so I knew the area, and so I told her, I said, "Oh, I know Broken Arrow," and started talking about it and stuff. And she's like, "Oh, that's good." And started conversations, and we talked a lot. And 3 weeks later, we got married, and I moved here. So
3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah, 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Love is love.
Well, we stood there. August 20th was when we got married, and we stood there looking at each other. And she said, "Are we crazy?" And I said, "No, I've been tested.
I'm certified.
I've been tested.
I'm better now."
I said, "You're the one we're in question about, not me." But yeah, so it's been great. It's been every day gets a little bit better. And she's definitely the female half of me. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And man, if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing these days?
Working for another car dealership.
There. Okay. Good for you.
And I can say this now. If this podcast would have been last week or week before, I'd been afraid to say it, or apprehensive anyways. I hate my job.
Sure.
God, I hate it. I mean, I can't stand it.
Listen, and if you've been a cop and you've been one for a while and you love the job and you were good at it, and obviously you rode up through the management. I don't want to say the civilian world, or just other jobs that don't provide, whether it's the adrenaline rush or the camaraderie. There's a lot of things that I think you get in this profession of law enforcement that you just don't get elsewhere.
When I first reached out a couple of years ago, when I first reached out to Sean Ryan, was talking to him, he told me, he said, "Look," he goes, you got to do something for a profession. You have to make money. He goes, "Doesn't matter what it is, just do it, but for God's sake, don't do anything in customer service." And he was right, because that's where I've been. And man,
you don't want to put up bullshit.
Yeah.
I'll say that's one. Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a people person. I mean, I can.
We don't.
Whatever. I mean, I can be wherever and have conversation with
Right.
people. Enjoy that. But it just, again, when you've been a cop, you don't want to put. You constantly have to listen to excuses or BS. And so imagine, and I'm just, whether it's wait staff somewhere, or like I said, even for you working at a car dealership, you get some jackass customer that comes in and stuff. You just like, God, I don't want to have to listen to this. Yeah. So, but It is what it is. I mean,
yeah, it's a step that has to be taken, and I'm taking it and looking for better things coming around the corner.
Yeah,
well, and I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they
especially
will
with the
too.
attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got, again, we've gone longer than we typically do, and just a few minutes left. But Howard, you talked about the chief, being, a hero at the beginning when he ran in, that he and the guys that went in for that. And it goes back to even the nurse that walked outside for you sitting in that emergency room. It's just there's people that are, I'm not into the higher being, all that type of conversation, type of deal. But there are people that are just in positions, and whether you call it right place, right time, whether it's just who they are as an individual, whatever, and you recognize and you step up and do what needs to be done.
Well, I think it's like police, nurses, we kind of innately gain this skill, or we're drawn to it because we have this skill that we see people.
Absolutely.
We
see things others don't.
We're able to see people.
Yep.
And I'm sure, I think that's probably karma. You've seen it helps a lot of people. And that nurse was walking out, looked over in that car and goes, "This ain't right. Let me help this."
I got to ask, was the nurse as sexy as Howard
ginger
here? Ginger bearded.
She looked clean shaven. I think
like Jason's legs.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like that.
Jason's legs are going to be as famous as red boots and apple crown on this podcast.
Yeah, they should be. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man.
Well, Greg, I mean, this is a great story. We wish all the luck to you.
And listen, hey, and you just started a podcast yourself. You're trying to get this thing up and running. Why don't you plug yourself, whether it is anything on social media, your podcast, anything you want, if people can find you.
Sure. I mean, I talked about Facebook a little bit. Yeah, the podcast. I've got a podcast and a YouTube channel that I've just started up. I'm a newbie, just keep that in mind, but it's called Chiefs Chronicles.
Okay.
Check it out.
Yep, absolutely. Chief, thank you so much
Cheers
for your time,
to you.
buddy.
Cheers. Appreciate you guys.